Hello, and welcome to this Pali-Studies tutorial. Well, we've been making our way through the different types of pronouns in the Pali language. And in this Pali Grammar tutorial, we're going to be looking at the interrogative pronoun and how questions are formed in the Pali language. You'll know by now that pronouns are substitutes for other substantive nouns, and the interrogative pronoun is used in the formation of questions. The term interrogative simply means something which asks a question. Now, you might be surprised to find that in English there are only 5 interrogative pronouns, and they are who, whom, whose, which, and what. And you'd be right to think that in English there are more ways to ask questions than just through the use of these pronouns. And we'll look at some other ways a little later. But remember what a pronoun actually is. It's a word which substitutes for another substantive noun. That's a person, place, or thing. So we use who or whom when we're asking a question about a person. We use whose when we're asking about a person's possession or characteristic. The pronoun which can be used when asking about either a person or a thing, and we tend to use it when the number of choices are limited. And we use the pronoun what to refer to things and when there are many options. Now notice how the pronoun who has both a subject and an object form. In traditional English, we would use who when asking about the subject of the verb, who did the action, and would use whom to replace the object of the verb, in other words, who received the action. And this is still seen as correct English, but most modern speakers would probably use who in both examples. The important thing to notice about interrogative pronouns is that they replace the person or thing that we are asking about. And this is actually what identifies them as pronouns. But like the other pronouns we've been looking at, interrogative pronouns can actually be used as pronominal adjectives. If you remember, a pronominal adjective qualifies a noun. That is, instead of standing alone as a noun themselves, they join with and qualify another noun, such as which books are you reading, or whose book are you reading. So you can see when acting in this way, they form a unit with the noun that they qualify, and together they represent the thing being asked about. Okay, well that's pronouns, but there are other words in the English language which are used to form questions. And these are called interrogative adverbs. The term adverb in English is a bit of a catch-all category for words which modify verbs or whole sentences. Adverbs generally provide us with more information about how the action of the verb is being carried out. Now, there's a subset of adverbs called interrogative adverbs, and these are words like why, where, when, and how. And these can be placed at the beginning of a sentence to create a question. Notice that they're not pronouns because they don't represent a person, place, or thing. But what they're asking for is more information. We can use them to ask for the reason why, or about the time or the place, the frequency, manner, or degree of the action taking place. Now the adverb how can be used in many ways. It can be used alone in a sentence, such as how did I get here? Or it can join with an adjective. How tall are you? It can be used with counting nouns, like many and much. How many books? Or it can be used with another adverb to ask about frequency or degree. For instance, how often do you go, or how quickly do you go? So the interrogative sentence in English, that is, a question, can be formed by different methods. One way is by the inclusion of interrogative words, like the pronouns and adverbs we've just looked at, where pronouns are used to ask about specific people, places or things, while adverbs ask for more information about the action of the verb. What are called yes-no questions, that is, questions which have a yes or no answer, can be formed by a couple of different methods. One is simply by inverting the word order of the sentence. In English, the word order is usually subject, verb, object. But by moving the verb to the front of the sentence, we form a yes-no question. For instance, John is a man can be made into a question by placing the verb first, so, is John a man? Another way we can do this is through the inclusion of interrogative particles. In English, these are also called auxiliary verbs. For instance, do you want this? Or can you move? Now it's worth mentioning here that forming questions in English is quite a complicated subject. And I'm not being exhaustive with my list here, but I just want to build a simple framework with which we can compare the interrogative sentence in Pali. So that's why these three methods are important to remember. Oh, and there's one more characteristic of questions in English, and that is, when written, all questions end with a question mark. So this now gives us a base to look at how questions are formed in the Pali language. And the first thing to notice is that there's no equivalent to the question mark in Pali, although some editors have actually added them in to the Pali texts. But questions in Pali can be recognized by some of the characteristics we've just discussed. So, a question in Pali can be formed by the inclusion of interrogative words, and that is both pronouns and adverbs. Likewise, yes-no questions can also be formed by the inversion of the subject and the verb, or by the inclusion of interrogative particles. So we're now going to look at each of these methods in turn. First, interrogative pronouns. In Pali, these are formed on the stem ka, which declines in all three genders, as listed in the table here. A few examples will help us make sense of how they're used. So let's look at some simple sentences in the singular. As we know, the nominative case is used for the subject of the verb, which in English would be who, which, or what. In the Pali sentence, ko, nama, te, acharyo, we can see that both ko and acharyo are in the nominative case. And we know that two words in nominative case in Pali can imply a linking verb, is, connecting the two. If we take te as a possessive pronoun, we get who is your teacher, while the word nama is actually an old accusative form, meaning literally by name. So who is your teacher by name? Or more simply, what is your teacher called? Now, ka, darika, both terms are in the feminine, and darika means girl, so which girl? And in the sentence, tasa ka gati, tasa again is a possessive pronoun, meaning of him or his, while gati is actually based on the verb gacha, meaning to go. But here it has the form of a feminine noun in the nominative case, meaning going, course, or direction. And the interrogative pronoun here is ka in the feminine, and this matches the noun gati. So we know the question is about the direction. So this can be rendered, which is his direction, or which direction is his. So the last example raises an important point. If we look at the English pronouns, we can see that who, whose and which can be used to ask about people, while which and what can be used to ask about anything which isn't a person. From this, one might assume that the genders in Pali, male and female, will correspond to the English pronouns representing people, whilst the neuter gender will correspond to the English pronouns which represent things, i.e. which and what. But as the last example has shown, in Pali, the interrogative pronoun takes the gender of the thing that the question is about. And when translating, we have to then decide whether the thing referred to is actually a person or a thing, and then choose the corresponding English pronoun. Okay, so let's continue. An interrogative pronoun in accusative case will represent the object of the verb. So in strict English, this will be whom, which or what. And in the sentence, Kang viharang agama, we can see that both Kang and viharang are both in accusative case, which means they're likely to form a unit. And agama is a third-person verb meaning to go, but it's in the past tense, so it can be rendered he went. So we can see that the question is about which abode he went to. Similarly, in the sentence Kang hetung pachesi, the verb ends in si, so is in second person, meaning you rely on, and again the two nouns are in accusative case to form a unit, asking what reason, or you rely on which reason. Pronouns in the genitive case are possessive, so we can render this of whom or whose. And if we look at an example, Kasa tvang dharmahang rochesi, taking this word for word, we can say of whom you, the Dharma, consent to, and the verb is in second person again, matching the pronoun you. And if we take kasa as a genitive interrogative pronoun, being a genitive, it will belong to another noun, and in this case, that's the Dharma. The Dharma of whom, or you consent to whose Dharma. Or in another example, Kisa Eyang Ejo Huti, of whom this goat is. Eyang and Ejo are both in nominative case, and here form a unit, so we can render this whose is this goat, or equally, whose goat is this? Now if we look at the dative, it has the same forms as the genitive case, but it means for whom, which or what. So in the example, tang, kissa, hetu, it can be rendered that, for which, reason. And because both tang and hetu are in nominative, they come in an implied linking verb, so we can say, for what reason is that, or that is for what reason. Now, I'm not going to go through all the cases, so we'll finish with the instrumental case, which means by or with whom, which or what. Like in the example, kena aditang, meaning with what ablaze, or ablaze with what. And kena denu arnita means by whom a cow brought. In this example, denu, a cow, is a female nominative, while kena is masculine, so we know that the question isn't directly about the cow, but by whom was the cow brought, or who brought the cow. Okay. Now, beside pronouns formed from the stem ka, there are a couple of other pronouns which can be used in an interrogative sense, and they are katama and katara. These both take the meaning which. Now, you might see in the guidebooks that katama is which of many, and katara is which of two choices, but in practice, both seem to be used as which of many choices. Finally, there's an adverbial adjective, kitaka, meaning how much or how big. And all three of these decline in the three genders. Now, I'm not going to go into these in any detail, as this is quite a long tutorial already. So we'll now move on to interrogative adverbs in Pali. There's actually quite a few interrogative adverbs, and I'll list most of them here in this table. Now, adverbs in Pali are indeclinable, and that means they do not alter in their case, number or gender. So their endings are always the same as you see here in this table. Also, as well as these adverbs, the neuter forms of the accusative, instrumental, ablative and genitive pronouns that we've just seen can also be used in an adverbial sense. And when this is so, they too are indeclinable, which means they won't decline to match anything else in the sentence. And when they're used adverbially in this way, they can take the meaning why, or simply just be placed at the start of a sentence to indicate that it's a question. Okay, so let's again go through some examples. Kuhing gachasi. The verb meaning to go is in second person, so we can render this, where do you go? Kuta agachati. Here the verb is in third person, meaning he comes. So, from where does he come? King denong pasasi. Again the verb is in second person, meaning you see, and the noun cow is in accusative, so it's the object that is seen. King here just indicates that the statement is actually a question. Do you see the cow? Well, hopefully from that brief run-through of interrogative pronouns and adverbs you get the idea of how they work in an interrogative sentence. So let's now look at how yes-no questions are formed. This can be by either inversion, and by that I mean that the verb is placed first in the sentence. If you remember in Pali, the word order, unlike English, is subject, object, verb. So we can create a question by placing the verb first, giving us verb, subject, object. For instance, Nagarang gachasi is a statement meaning you go to the city. But if we place the verb first in the sentence, gachasi nagarang, we could render this as a question. You go to the city? Or do you go to the city? But be aware in Pali that sometimes the word order is reversed merely to create emphasis and doesn't always indicate a question. Finally, we have the inclusion of interrogative particles, namely api and nu. Api actually has many meanings, but when used as an interrogative, it's always placed first in the sentence. So the sentence, api amarkang, martarang, janasi, word by word means, our, mother, you know. We can see that the nouns for our and mother are both in accusative case, and so form a unit. So we can render this, do you know our mother? The other interrogative particle is nu, and nu is an enclitic. This term literally means to follow, and so enclictics always follow another word. In effect, nu will generally be the second word in a sentence. And again, it indicates that that sentence is actually a question. Now both these particles are often followed by another, which is ko. So we can have api-ko, nu-ko, or even api-nu-ko. And the term ko merely serves as emphasis. And they can also be joined with the negative particle na, to create nanu, meaning is it not, or nu na, why not? So, that brings us to the end of our look at the interrogative sentence in the Pali language. What we've seen is that Pali has no equivalent to the question mark. but we can tell if a sentence is a question if it includes an interrogative word, like a pronoun or an adverb. And we've seen that pronouns agree in gender and number with the thing to which they refer, which is generally what the question is about, whereas adverbs are indeclinable and ask for more information about the action of the verb. Also, yes and no questions can be formed by inversion, which is essentially placing the verb first in the sentence. And finally, questions can be formed by the inclusion of the interrogative particles api and nu. Well, this has been quite a long tutorial, and I hope you've stuck with it. If you want more information, please visit my website.